Start with Curtis Mayfield, who we're going to be covering for the second time. Before I start the clock for us, Matt, give us some numbers. It's Superfly.
Superfly by Curtis Mayfield. So in the Rolling Stone list, the top 500 list, this comes in at number 76 of all time. So very highly regarded in the new Rolling Stone list. In best ever albums, it's ranked number 125 in the 1970s and number 12 in the year 1972 and 531 overall. So it did pretty well, I would say, as the overall charts here.
Absolutely. Okay. And for a review of an earlier Curtis Mayfield album, it is also a cold listen hot take. And it was actually, I believe, was it our second show in the 70s in the bonus groupings, or our first show? I probably should have done my research on that at least.
The first one. It was the first one.
Yep. And it's the 1970 album Curtis. So if you want to dig in, that's where you'd find it.
And this album, Superfly, is his highest ranked album in best ever albums, while Curtis is number 2. So,
gotcha. Okay. So we're covering the best of the best here in Curtis's early career post impressions. I'm going to go ahead and start the clock, and I'm going to pitch to Josh. Josh, what are your thoughts on this album?
So I had a little bit of experience. No, I knew this album already. I've seen the movie before, Superfly.
Is this the first one, Josh, for the Code Listens that you knew the album going into the show?
I think so. Yeah,
could be. Yeah, it's kind of a rarity, right? Like usually these are all brand new to us. So
right, and we don't have. I mean, at least yet, we haven't had too many soundtrack albums. In general. So this is probably one of the best, if not the best, soundtrack album ever. It epitomizes the blaxploitation sound and the funk that goes along with it. Mayfield is eponymous with that as well, I think, and this movie is the same. Right from the start, you get the wow chicka chicka wow like type of sound that is indicative of this album, and then it follows along through the album, loosely following the story that the movie tells. Pusher Man, which is the second track on the album, is probably one of my favorite songs of all time, even though it's about drug dealers, and it's just one of those songs that makes you dance and has an immediate pull to its song and to its sound, and it's really catchy. I feel like the rest of the album is the same way. Even the instrumental tracks, which there are a few on here, really hold up well. And this is, I know you guys weren't as high when we talked about the Curtis self-titled album back on the Coldest Hot Takes 1, but I feel like this is kind of what I heard also on that album, although I think this does it better. He just really captures an era of black life, maybe exaggerated a little bit for the movie, but it just has all these great vibes and sounds and instrumentation, and there's horns in this as well. And yeah, I love it. I love this album.
Gotcha. Matt, what were your thoughts?
So I liked it, and it seemed like I could not really differentiate much between this and the first Curtis Mayfield album that we heard. Yeah. So what you said there, Josh, I agree with. It's a lot of my notes are just very similar to kind of my thoughts on the first one that we covered. This it's a very 70s sounding album, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I just mean that's when you hear this, it's like, yeah, this is the 70s, and there's a ton of instrumentation going on here, right? There's full-blown orchestra, string arrangements, there's horns, there's the bongo drums again are very prevalent here, the wah-wah guitar, and it's all, centered around Curtis Mayfield's voice, that falsetto, that smooth falsetto that he has throughout the whole record. That's just really great. So a lot of this was just kind of, I didn't really. I picked up on some of the messaging about, there's a lot of drug references here, life on the streets, Pusher Man. There's one even here, No Thing on Me, or the cocaine song.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's about drugs. So there's a lot of that stuff. And Junkie Chase, that was one of the instrumentals here. So obviously you're I've never seen the movie, but you're just picking up on kind of what's going on in the film there. But yeah, I can just listen to this soundtrack and picture in my head, dudes just walking down the street in their 70s, outfits and,
Right.
and stuff, kind of doing their thing, bell bottom jeans, stuff like that. I was surprised with the last track. I was like, oh, the Beastie Boys. I recognize that bass line. That's from something in Paul's Boutique, one of the probably 8,000 things that they sampled in Paul's Boutique. But that was great as well. I don't think I knew any of these songs. Freddie's Dead sounded a little familiar. I'm not sure if that was, I don't know if any of these were singles or anything like that, if I might have heard that before somewhere. But overall, I liked it. Again, this isn't my genre. It's and I really haven't listened to Curtis. I didn't go back and listen to Curtis's debut album, Curtis, after listening to it on the cold listen. So this is really like 2 times I've really listened to this in my entire life. I like it. It's interesting. It's definitely has a lot of grooves going on. Very danceable. I liked it. I wouldn't say I love it because it's not really my type of thing that I would love, but I do appreciate it. I like it for it's kind of what it's doing, and it was a fun listen. So I liked it.
I probably will draw this in larger sketches. While there's similarities in terms of the musicality of this album to Curtis, for sure, it does feel to some degree like a continuation of it. The theme, probably because of the nature of the movie, it's scoring, and while that movie itself is sort of a big hyperbolic film, it is talking about real problems in urban America at that point in time, and so it's a darker album for sure. The Curtis was pretty uplifting. There were definitely periods of clouds with some of the civil rights stuff, but it still was a very hopeful album, and the sound of it, this is a darker album. One thing that comes across immediately is this is a true soundtrack album. As you said, Matt, you've never seen the movie, but you get a gist of what's going on from the lyrics and the tone within the songs. It does line up very well with the film in terms of what's going on in the film, at times even literally, like Freddie's Dead and stuff like that. But I think I read something about this one time that said this is the black equivalent of Saturday Night Fever. And I think that's actually a really good description, not necessarily musically, but for where it was in the culture and what it represented. It created a sound that you could listen to and have a general sketch of what early 70s soul sounds like. Maybe even more so. And we haven't covered either of these guys yet, although we'll cover one of these guys later in this very episode, actually. Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, we're all around here. But Curtis Mayfield, if you're a novice listening to this type of music, is probably as good a place to start as any. He's certainly more accessible than There's a Riot Going On by Sly and the Family Stone that we covered. But they're covering a lot of the same issues when you think about it. They kind of hit the same touch point, and they're both in that soul funk genre. The difference is just the arrangement, isn't it? And that Curtis Mayfield has these lush melodies with clear bass lines. Nothing's muddled with it. It's crystalline. It's complicated, but also it's not impenetrable. Whereas Sly and the Family Stone is kind of the opposite. It's stuff pushed to the back. It's at times impenetrable, especially the lyrics. When we listen to it, you don't have to search for the lyrics in this on purpose, because it's a soundtrack, so you want to hear what's going on. But I do think that description of it as being sort of the Saturday Night Fever album of both blaxploitation films, but also in general soul music in the early 70s really stands out. Like the earlier album, it's got really good bass lines. He's very good. He's got that falsetto voice, which is very recognizable. At the beginning, it's clear funk. The songwriting is really strong too. He has a real knack with melody that I like, and he somehow manages to make tough music, but that doesn't become a parody, if that makes sense. And I think that's why this soundtrack has outlived the film in terms of it's almost a movie like Saturday Night Fever, where the soundtrack is more well known than the film is at this point, and you could put two together. But that's sort of my general stuff. You mentioned Pusher Man, which is a great song. My favorite song on the entire album is Freddie's Dead. I just think that does a really good job of tone and mood. The The lyrics are direct. It's really funky. I like that. Unlike you guys who talk about it being, I'm not a dance person, so I don't think of necessarily. I think of music as a groove more so than do I dance to this. And so like I totally get how someone could dance to this, but I don't. When I'm listening to Curtis Mayfield, I'm not thinking, oh, let me get up and dance. I'm thinking, and for that reason, for that matter, all R&B and soul. I'm never thinking, can I dance? I'm thinking more like, am I in a groove?
Are you bobbing your head, John?
It's more, I think of it in the context, I think like a rhythm section in music would. Like, what are the bass lines? Where are the drums at on this? And then I experience the vocals on top of it. And we've talked about this before. I always go to the rhythm section first. So funk is a very easy thing to get into a certain groove for me because the bass is right there. Oftentimes there's rhythm guitar and brass as well, which adds to the rhythm section. And the drums, you pretty quickly realize, are they faded in the back, or are they out in front thundering, or are they going back and forth? So songs like No Thing on Me, the Cocaine song, has one vibe to it. Junkie Chase, as you might imagine, even though it's even shorter, which I think is kind of cool because it's a chase scene, right? So it's a shorter song, which I think's a neat way to conceptualize that. And of course, all the way at the end with Superfly, which ties everything together thematically. So you don't really see soundtrack albums later in the 80s and 90s that have a theme like this, because normally it was just soliciting work from different artists. It's a very different soundtrack when one artist does the whole soundtrack.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that. I definitely enjoyed this more than Curtis. I felt this was a more fully formed version of Curtis Mayfield's sound, and maybe it was the little bit more edge in it, but I connected a lot more with it, and as a result, I was able to slide into the groove a little bit more. So this is a thumbs up for me for sure.
Matt, listening to the soundtrack, and John, I assume you had seen the film before based on what you were saying.
I have. Yep,
yeah.
I have.
Matt, does it feel like you're interested to see the film more, hearing the soundtrack?
I don't know if I would say that. I'd see. It's not saying that I wouldn't see the film, but I can't say that I heard this and I was like, oh man, now I need to see the film.
Right.
So honestly, that's probably the one thing that, like, over the years that I've really like fallen off on is movies. Like, in some ways I've kept up with music or TV or movies. I don't really see a whole lot of movies anymore. But I would see it. Is it's good, Josh?
Yeah, it's entertaining.
How many popcorn boxes or whatever, however your rating scale? What's on?
I don't think I've rated it because I haven't seen it since I started rating stuff.
Okay, all right.
I feel we use Saturday Night Live, Saturday Night Fever. I feel in many ways that it's like a musical in some ways, like Grease, not thematically, but do you get what I'm saying, Matt? Where it's tongue in cheek and
yes,
it's a slice of life, but it's a kind of a ridiculous outsized slice of life that
for sure.
you can recognize, but it's almost a parody of the slice of life in the way that Grease is a parody of slice of life 50s or
right. I think with blaxploitation, I mean, I'm kind of aware of what the theme is, or what that that kind of parody, what they're going for there. But yeah, there's that's just the thing. Like, there's tons of older movies that I've just never seen before, and I need to get caught up on. But I would see this, for sure. The other thing I liked is we talk about all the bass and the grooves and all that stuff, but like, I love how he throws the harp on here, which is totally not something that you would have associated. And he did this on the first album.
He did it on the first album, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and I remember that. I'm like, the bongos, the harp. It's like an interesting combination of things. And for a funk type album to throw the harp in there and make it work is kind of unique. Like, I like that. See, it's about the second or third time we've heard the harp. Like we did, Alice Coltrane had that too, in a really unique way as well. So I'm kind of digging the harp. It's not overly used, but when we've heard it being used, it's found a place, oddly enough, which in a genre that you wouldn't ordinarily find the harp. So I like that.
I will say that while I enjoyed this album quite a bit and would pretty highly recommend this, I do find that I don't know if I'd say the harder edged, but the type of funk that Funkadelic and Isaac Hayes were doing hits me a little bit more. I think some of it might have to do with the voice. The falsetto voice lends itself to a different type of vibe. and hits in a different way. Whereas I always felt Isaac Hayes and, with the deep bass, and then, in Funkadelic there's multiple people singing, but, it's a lot of times it's more like baritone and even tenor at the highest, right? It's because of that, I think the rhythm section sounds more, has a little bit more dark edge to it, I guess, or dangerous edge to it. This album, even though it's singing about dangerous topics, and it gives a feel in its own way, I don't know if it doesn't feel as dangerous to me. And I like my funk music to feel a little dangerous. I don't really know how to explain it, but there's a hierarchy for me of funk, and I think Curtis Mayfield doesn't quite hit me in the same way that those other two artists do.
Danger funk.
Yeah, it's hard for me to explain. It's just the way the rhythm section pops out. Now, the wah-wah guitar here is probably done better here than in almost any funk album we've covered, I would say. I think I'd go that far as to say I think this is the best. And that's Curtis Mayfield, if I remember correctly, playing that wah-wah guitar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and composing all of this stuff. So, yeah, it was definitely enjoyable. And definitely, I mean, very much, it's every bit as essential to listen to in the 70s as albums that have been talked about, your Exile and, Ziggy Stardust. And, this one's every bit as essential as those albums, just coming from a different genre. And sometimes that might be under-discussed, but I think it's a must-listen if you want to understand the early 70s, certainly in soul and R&B and even, just in black music.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this would be a one I would like to know kind of the background of how he got involved with the project, if he was the person right away that was tasked with scoring the soundtrack, or if they were hunting around, or that would be something worth researching on my end, I think.
That could be a combination, cleaning the stacks and Josh's movie corner.
Yeah, true. Whole project.
If you were so inclined, Josh. I don't mean
Indeed.
to put you on the spot there, but...
Well, you'll have to tune into our next episode to see if Josh cleans that stack. But I think that's going to put an end to our first segment of the show. Superfly by Curtis Mayfield. Sounds like 3 recommendations, pretty strong across the board, but particularly Josh and I would recommend it for you. Matt, I would say enjoyable, but not strenuous, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that maybe with more listens, I might like it more. But it's a little outside my normal lane. But I did like it. It was good.
Well, speaking of being